Hello and welcome to Political Geekery, a podcast about science, politics and the intersection of the two. I'm Sean.
And I'm Mark. Yeah, so this month I wanted to talk about American gun crime and the problems they seem to be having. I personally don't think it's just culture. It's also the amount of guns that America has. So for example, the fourth country in the world to have the most amount of guns would be Switzerland. Out of 100 people, it's got 45 guns out of that 100, so per capita. The third would be Yemen, which has 45 guns per 100 people. And the second would be Serbia, which has 69 guns per 100 people. So that being said, how many guns do you think America would have per 100 people, Sean? I love doing this to you.
250.
It's not quite as high as that. It's 112 guns per 100 people, which means that somewhere out there, there's obviously some people without guns, but then there's people with like 5.
Yeah.
So obviously skews the facts a little bit. But so I personally think that a gun ban won't make much difference straight off. You know, it'll take quite a few years to make a big difference, but at the same time, I think the sooner they do it, the better. Obviously, but it's going to take a long time for those guns to get out of circulation, both legal and illegal ones. I also think that if they were to have a ban and, for example, another shooting happened, I think both for the right-wing sides and people like the NRA would be like, well, look, obviously the ban isn't working. And they'd probably use that as much as they can to go against it, I think. So,
yeah. I mean, I do wonder whether those sort of mass shootings, I mean, they are terrible things, obviously. It's kind of like, are they not sort of relatively rare instances, if you know what I mean? I mean, do they really capture the broad sweep of gun violence in America?
It's one of the things I wanted to come on to, and again I'm going to ask you another annoying question. So, it's not just mass shootings that's a problem. In fact, there's problems which don't even tend to get reported so much. So, how many kids do you think are shot every day in America, on average?
Fucking hell. Like, I mean, are we talking anybody under the age of 18?
It's anyone under the age of 19, read up, but yeah, it's still too young to be shot, frankly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's not a good age to be shot, is there? But yeah, fucking hell. I mean, I don't want to be flippant, as I usually do when I don't know the answer, so, I don't know, like, I'll say, like, 20, 15?
Again, you're overestimating it, Tad. It's about 7 a day. But if you imagine if it was any other product that was new, imagine a new toy that was killing 5 kids a day. It'd be off the market there'd be a riot about it. There wouldn't even be a debate on the subject. One of the things that is really interesting is Australia did have guns that you could buy legally, and they had a mass shooting, and they decided that enough's enough. They did have a ban, similar to what we have in Britain, and there hasn't been a shooting since 1996, but then the amount of guns that are on their streets was significantly less than America's. So I think part of the reason why the banning of guns worked so well is because there were so few guns compared to the likes of America. And yeah, it's something to consider.
Because like a lot of these things, like these mass shootings and things like that, fundamentally, yeah, you kind of got other things going on. I mean, the Charleston shooting, that was that was like a racially motivated attack.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you see this with the Elliot Rodger thing, where that was like fundamentally, I think, motivated by misogyny on his part.
I was going to come on to him though, because like looking into him a little bit, he had mental health issues which they're aware of at the age of 9 apparently, and so but that's a problem within itself, in that he was still quite easily able to get hold of a gun despite having some issue, you know. it should be made more difficult, I think,
Yeah,
for A, young people, and B, because he was only age 22 when he did what he did. Add to that the fact that he obviously did have some issues.
Yeah, but I mean, again, you get into maybe kind of dangerous territory with that when you're sort of talking about mental health.
It's a blanket term, but
I mean, especially because statistically speaking, like sort of people with mental health problems are more likely to be the victims than the perpetrators of violent crime. I mean, this kind of comes into, I mean, the whole thing with guns in America, where I'm always kind of, I don't know, like it seems sometimes like it's a little too easy to just sort of just put it down to the number of guns that are available. I mean, I think it's a factor when it comes to these sort of mass shootings and things like that guns are easily available, and it's much easier to sort of go out and murder a load of people with a gun than it is with a knife or something like that.
Yeah,
but it's kind of like there are sort of other underlying causes there, and you get that argument from some people. Sorry, yeah.
Well, that's what I'm saying, though. It's not just culture; it's the amount. I'm saying it is both. I'm not saying it's just the amount.
You also, I've seen this from, and not just from like sort of paranoid sort of conservatives, but from sort of a lot of fairly sensible people in the US, and people who are in quite vulnerable positions. They're sort of saying, well, I don't necessarily feel safe in the situation that I'm in. Like a lot of people, like sex workers in like some parts of America and things like that, who are saying, well, it's no good to me calling the police if I'm attacked on the street.
Yeah.
And there are already guns there. They're already particularly vulnerable to attack, and they're saying, well, unfortunately, I may be in a situation where I need to defend myself. There's a lot going on there. I suppose is what I'm saying.
I completely appreciate what you're saying. I mean, I've suffered from depression. I wouldn't want them to. If I was in America, I'd probably feel as though I'd want a gun because there is so much gun crime. I'm a complete hypocrite, I admit, but that's usually the NRA's go-to answer, isn't it? There's gun problems. The only way you're going to solve it is to have more good people with guns.
Yeah.
No.
The NRA, I think, are coming from it from yet another angle, and because I mean, a lot of that is this kind of this image that, to be honest, I think persists in white middle class America of sort of the homeowner and this kind of thing of I have to defend my home, and a lot of this stuff is coming from like suburb dwellers who think that at some point their house is going to be like attacked by a bunch of marauding fucking killers straight out of The Purge or something.
It's hard to say with America though, because they've got such a diverse culture. I mean, there are places obviously where crime is very high, and other places where aren't so much. So again, I can see why you want one to defend a home, but yeah, I suppose I don't agree with the guns overall, but I can see where they're coming from, is what I'm saying. I like the fact that the NRA try to blame stuff like computer games for shootings. This is one of the go-to excuses. But the NRA actually make computer games themselves, despite being a non-profit organisation, apparently. Now, I'll give them a little bit of credit. Some of the games that they make tend to be like shooting at ducks and things rather than people, but they can't blame computer games for it and then then make computer games with guns in them. That doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the whole computer game thing with violence in general is kind of like, to my knowledge, there's never been any credible evidence at all linking these kind of things to any kind of violence.
The fact that crime is going down and computer games sell enormously well. Now, I know correlation doesn't mean causation necessarily, but if computer games are really making people more violent, then surely we'd be seeing it going up, not down.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and this is an interesting thing, I think, actually, that as violent crime overall is going down. I mean, I think there's a lot of sort of hypotheses out there to explain that.
I think it's a number of factors.
Yeah,
it's too hard to put your finger on one thing or another.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the most interesting things I've seen is actually about lead in the atmosphere. I mean, because there is actually quite a lot of credible evidence that after you start seeing leaded petrol, there's kind of a 20-year lag, followed by a big jump in violent crime. And in countries where it's then been removed, you see a lag and then a drop, and it's been quite consistent across countries.
That's interesting.
And we do know that sort of lead can interfere with like executive function and things like that, and impair judgment. So I mean, there's and you also just got things like maybe just culturally we're getting better, or I mean, there's a lot to sort of.
There's supposed to be a spike in crime right after World War II as well, which makes sense because people didn't have a lot of things and people are rationed, and I can see that, and it's been steadily declining from that as well. As we both said, it's a number of things.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's interesting that we're sort of seeing this general trend in sort of prosperous Western countries, at least. I'm not sure how consistent it is elsewhere. We're seeing this sort of general trend of violent crime declining. When it comes to these sort of mass shootings in America, it does seem like they're becoming more and more common. Maybe like.
I think it's
whether it's just they're reported more, I don't know.
I think it is. Well, I've heard psychologists say a few times that they shouldn't report on it so much because it encourages others to then do the same sort of thing because they know how much attention it brings. Yeah, and they do the exact opposite. I mean, it's big news when it happens, and
yeah. I mean, this is the thing. Like, I mean, cause I mentioned Elliot Rodger before, and to be honest, I struggled to find a way to talk about it without talking about him. I mean, this is one of the things, isn't it, that they sort of say, don't make it about the shooter.
Yeah.
And, it's a very difficult thing to do.
How do you address it without... Yeah, I know what you're saying.
But...
I think it's gotten to the point where they need to address it and come up with something new, even if it doesn't encourage it. They're reaching a turning point sooner or later.
Yeah.
There's only so many times the president can come out on TV and go, oh, there's not much we can do. I try. I think one of the more disturbing things about the culture that they're in is rather than coming up with any kind of legislation to get rid of it, they're now coming up with like adverts to, run, hide and fight. This is the thing that they're trying to get into people's brains when mass shootings are going off. That's the way that they're coming at this problem, and it's just, that blows my mind.
Yeah, I mean, 'cause the thing is that's never going to stop more shootings from occurring, I don't think. Because the thing is that you get the impression with a lot of these shootings, very few of these people go into this with the idea that they're going to get away with it.
Well, no, I mean, a lot of them end up turning the gun themselves at the end of it, don't they? So.
Yeah, so it's not going to discourage, because like nobody's going to say, well, I was going to go on a shooting spree around my workplace,
but then somebody might fight back.
Yeah, like I don't think that's ever gonna. It might like slightly reduce the death toll of some of them, I suppose. The argument that would be made. But
they're not dealing with the problem. They're just sort of trying to change the culture after the fact. Which
I mean, the fact that this is advice that they feel, that somebody feels the need to give is pretty disturbing.
Yeah, well, that's why I wanted to bring it up. It's just like, do something other than making public adverts. Obviously, that's what needs to happen.
Been thinking lately about drug legislation and why we sort of have laws banning the sale or the possession of certain substances. I mean, we're often sort of told that the reason that some drugs are illegal and others aren't is because, that the state needs to protect us from the really bad drugs. And these are the harmful ones, and I mean, and I've got a confession to make here. I'm a drug addict. I mean, the drug I'm addicted to, it's linked to 100,000 deaths in the UK every year. I mean, some of the possible health complications from the NHS Choices website are, lung cancer, throat cancer, lip cancer, cardiovascular disease, heart attacks, aneurysms, strokes. I mean, the drug in question being nicotine. Well, specifically ingesting nicotine by smoking tobacco.
Yeah.
And that's completely legal. I mean, as of 2013, roughly 19% of UK adults, about 9.5 million people, were smokers. And I mean, taking that as a rough estimator with that 100,000 deaths, sort of say that you could expect about 10,500 smoking-related deaths for every million smokers every year.
Yeah.
And the British Medical Association reckons that treating smoking-related diseases costs the NHS £2.7 billion every year.
Wow.
I mean, I really should quit, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But I mean, see, this gets me thinking, 'cause, like, over the last few months, the government's been looking to revise drug legislation in the form of this sort of proposed ban on all psychoactive substances, with the exception of alcohol, tobacco, and caffeine. Sort of two of the most, on an absolute scale, alcohol and tobacco are probably two of the most harmful drugs out there.
Was that lethal toxicity paper where alcohol came out on top of everything, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Of how much you can consume before it can potentially kill you. Alcohol comes out on top.
Yeah.
And that was above, I think, heroin, which surprised me.
Yeah, I mean, heroin is one of the worst, I think, particularly because it's so addictive, and because it's quite easy to overdose on heroin.
Yeah. It's more damaging long term. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, the long term. Well, in the long term, neither of them are great.
No.
This sort of blanket ban that's been proposed is sort of in response to this rising tide of panic over the alleged harms done by legal highs, as they're called. So, I mean, substances that are not currently illegal, but maybe have similar effects to other banned drugs. So, I mean, you get things like spice, which is supposed to mimic the effects of cannabis, or you had until it was banned, you had mephedrone, MCAT, which was a lot of people said was similar to MDMA. I mean, a lot of these drugs are much dirtier and much nastier than the original drugs. There's a reason why. I mean, people are pretty much taking them because they're legal rather than because it's their preferred option.
I suppose with the older drugs, people know what to expect and know what they're supposed to taste like, to some degree.
Well, we have an idea of the effects of a lot of these older drugs, whereas and people are obviously, the problem was, from the government's point of view, that it's kind of like, well, if we just ban individual substances, and somebody just comes up with a new formulation that
it is problematic.
So and the solution, which is kind of sledgehammer to crack a fucking nut, was ban everything essentially, except for the things which banning would cause too much trouble.
Yeah.
I mean, for instance, one drug that received quite a lot of coverage over the last year was nitrous oxide, laughing gas, also known as hippie crack by the press, and I don't think anybody else. I've never heard anybody else call it that.
No, I've not.
But yeah,
that was one Sir Humphrey Davy always used to abuse, apparently, and it did kill him.
Yeah, well, I mean, nitrous oxide, it's used as an anaesthetic in medical settings. In small doses, it does sort of induce giddiness and elevate mood.
I was going to say, his explanation of that, sorry to interrupt, was that it gives you all the same effects as alcohol, only doesn't give you the hangover. Of course, it can kill you stone dead too, so...
Well, I mean, this is kind of what I wanted to talk about. I mean, people sort of fill balloons with the stuff and inhale them, is how people tend to take it, and it's not risk-free. I mean, like, one thing I think that people who are using it should be particularly aware of is use in enclosed spaces. So you might see people are using it in basements, so very crowded spaces. I mean, that can be quite dangerous because you're putting yourself at risk of oxygen deprivation, things like that. The Daily Mail pointed out that 17 deaths were attributed to nitrous oxide from 2006 to 2012 in an April 2015 article which had the measured and calm headline, "Hippie crack craze will kill more teens, warns doctor. Experts predict rise in deaths linked to nitrous oxide, which has already killed 17 people this year." Note that the 17 people were not actually killed in 1 year. They were killed over the course of 6 years, as stated in the body of the article. Some sterling journalism from the Mail there.
Yeah, figures.
But so that's 17 deaths over the course of 6 years. It's about 3 deaths per year from using nitrous oxide recreationally. Obviously, that doesn't tell us much if we don't know sort of how many people are doing it. So, an August 2014 report from the Home Office titled "Drug Misuse: Findings from the 2013-14 Crime Survey for England and Wales" found that around 400,000 people each year were using nitrous oxide recreationally. So that would mean that for every, we take that sort of 3 deaths a year as roughly what's going on.
Yeah.
That's sort of telling us that for every million people using laughing gas, we can expect 7 deaths per year. And if we compare that back to smoking, that's a health hazard 4 orders of magnitude smaller. So, I mean, there's a lot of confusion about harm from drugs, and I think not helped by sort of panics in the press.
I was going to say, more people probably die in car crashes than...
Oh,
well, I'm
yeah.
sure they... yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. See, I mean, like, you get this confusion. In 2009, the then chairman of the Advisory Council on the Misuse of Drugs, Professor David Nutt, published an article in the Journal of Psychopharmacology titled Equacy, a Harmful Addiction.
Yeah.
In the article, he described this harmful addiction, equacy, as leading to 10 deaths and 100 road traffic accidents every year, with 1 in 350 exposures leading to a serious adverse event. Now, equacy is not a drug. I don't know if you've read this article or if you're familiar with it.
I'm not familiar with it.
So, I mean,
I've read a bit
whether
of David Nutt, but yeah.
I don't know whether you sort of care to venture what it is he's talking about that kills 10 people every year.
Oh, I don't know.
It's 3 times more dangerous than hippie crack.
It's probably something daft like caffeine, did I guess?
It's horseback riding.
No, I can see that.
Yeah, and well, I mean, if falling off a horse is not, you want to avoid it. So, I mean, Nutt pointed out that the harms and relative risks associated with equacy are roughly equivalent to those of MDMA consumption. I pointed out that there are many risky activities such as base jumping, climbing, bungee jumping, hang gliding, motorcycling, which have harms and risks equal to or worse than many illicit drugs. And he asked, again, I quote, why are harmful sporting activities allowed, whereas relatively less harmful drugs are not?
Mm.
I mean, how do you think that the press reacted to this?
Just to think.
Yeah, not well.
Yeah.
They accused Professor Nutt of promoting drug use.
Of course they did.
They
were probably trying to tarnish his name just simply because he did work for the government and then got fired for telling facts.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is the thing. I mean, it got to the point where, I mean, I remember this at the time. One of the papers, I forget which, they managed to find, I think, his son's Facebook page or something. Or something like that. It was some social media profile, and they'd gotten a picture of his son smoking a bong, and like put this in the paper as like, look, this guy's son is doing drugs. It's like his son, I think, was like in his early 20s at the time. It's like this ridiculous fucking just personal attack and witch hunting.
Ad hominem, isn't it? It's just nothing to do with the arguments and everything to do with trying to attack the person.
Yeah. I mean,
it's irrelevant.
Yeah, I mean, David Nutt. I mean, since then he wrote a book, Drugs Without the Hot Air, which is, and I'm working through it at the moment. It's a decent read. Like,
yeah, I think I've read some of it.
Yeah, and he's a good writer, and he explains sort of the risks of these things very well. I'd recommend it to anybody. So, I mean, all the fuss over that article led to this sort of really amazing exchange between him and Jackie Smith, who was the Home Secretary at the time.
Yeah.
And he relays this conversation in the book. So, Jackie Smith, you can't compare harms from a legal activity with an illegal one. David Nutt, why not? Jackie Smith, because one's illegal. David Nutt, why is it illegal? Jackie Smith, because it's harmful. David Nutt,
tad circular.
David Nutt, don't we need to compare harms to determine if it should be illegal? Jackie Smith, you can't compare harms from a legal activity with an illegal one. I mean, actually a circular argument.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, ultimately this scandal led to Professor Nutt losing his position as chair of the ACMD, basically after he refused to stop undermining the government by talking about the actual evidence.
Yeah. Don't upset the government with facts.
Yeah. It's sort of, to paraphrase an old joke about statistics, it seems like the government uses expert advice on drugs like a drunk uses a lamppost. For support, not for illumination. I mean, it's pretty clear that drug legislation as it stands and this proposed new legislation doesn't make a whole lot of sense. We're not looking at harms, we're not looking at social benefit, we're just sort of being led by sort of moral panic.
I think that's a problem within government, though. They're not wanting hard facts, they're just wanting to pander to the people that voted for them. So rather than explaining why this is scientifically the right thing or right way to go, they'll just pander to the people even if it's completely wrong. And it's a problem that all parties have, I think, not just Labour, Tories, and any political party on the planet.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Jackie Smith, she was a Labour minister. Like, I mean, all this stuff would not
I knew
happen
it was Labour,
under Gordon Brown's government.
Yeah.
It was just Yeah, Theresa May, who's now coming out with this ridiculous, let's ban everything approach. She's put David Amos in charge of the committee for that one. I don't know. Have you ever heard of David Amos?
No, sorry.
I mean, do you remember Brass Eye? The Brass Eye drugs special.
I've seen bits of it.
Yeah, they invented this fake drug called cake.
Yeah.
And they got all these celebrities to talk about how dangerous it was. So it was like, it acts on the part of the mind called Shatner's bassoon. And but David Amos, who was an MP at the time, and he still is somehow. He actually appeared on it as one of the people that they'd tricked into sort of recording this sort of spoof, like, warning video about it. He also asked questions in Parliament about this completely fictional drug.
I did not know that.
Yeah,
remember
this is the person that Theresa May has put in charge here.
I remember seeing clips from it, and the drug they were talking about was actually the same size as a genuine cake.
Yeah.
That didn't give him a clue somehow.
Yeah, there's that bit with Bernard Manning. I was in it, I think, and he's like. It was like, one little kid, he cried all of the water out of his body. It's a fucking disgrace. It's like, if anybody tries to give you a cake, throw it back in their face and tell them to fuck off.
Oh, God.
Yeah, I mean, but on top of that, I mean, I think one of the big problems with drug legislation as it's actually enforced is that it's actually pretty racist. The Drug Policy Reform Charity Release put out a report on this. It was called The Numbers in Black and White, Ethnic Disparities in the Policing and Prosecution of Drug Offences in England and Wales. One of the things they did was they looked at statistics from the Metropolitan Police from 2009 to 2010. So they found that black people were around 6 times more likely to be stopped and searched for drugs, at a rate of 45 per thousand for black Londoners compared to 7 per thousand for white Londoners, despite being about half as likely to use drugs as white people on average.
Yeah.
They found that 44% of white people found in possession of cocaine by the Met in this period were charged, compared with 78% of black people.
That's pretty bad.
Yeah, and that black people were 5 times more likely to be charged for possession of cannabis than white people, and 3 times more likely to be cautioned. And Release point out that, quote, this jump in disproportionality at the charge stage demonstrates that black people are more likely to receive a harsher police response for possession of cannabis. So, I mean, this is the thing that these... And, it is funny in a way, like the ridiculousness of a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
But the consequences of it, I think, are very serious. And, a lot of people, a lot of young people, and a lot of vulnerable people, and, are sort of put in a really terrible position by these laws.
I struggle to understand why cannabis is still illegal, to be honest, these days. It seems silly to me,
Yeah, well, I think it keeps coming back to this thing with the press, because the press will just jump all over anything, any sort of politician, any government figure. I mean, like even just civil servants like Professor David Nutt. If they're seen to be soft on drugs, they'll jump all over them, and they will basically go out of their way to completely destroy them.
I genuinely thought that America would never legalise cannabis in my lifetime. Parts, should I say. There's about, I'm not sure how many states it is, there's about 5, which...
I thought it was only 2 of them.
I think there's 2 where it's completely illegal, and you can get it prescription in about 5. I may be completely wrong on that, but...
Yeah.
That I wouldn't ever have guessed on. And the fact that they're starting to do it before us, again, I wouldn't have ever saw that one coming.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It is interesting that we're saying this. I mean, it would be nice to sort of see some... I mean, because the thing is, on top of all the stuff about harm and things like that, I mean, I tend towards the view as well that people should, ultimately be free to make decisions about their own bodies.
Yeah, if you own anything, it's your own body.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing, that it's like, you could say like from what I was saying, that you can say, oh, well, are you arguing for smoking to be illegal? And I'm not. I mean, besides the fact that I don't think that banning things really helps. I mean, as I said with the legal high thing, people will seek ways around the laws and they'll end up going for more dangerous options because they're legal, or they'll get their drug of choice from dealers who are not really that bothered about the quality or the purity of their product.
No.
And besides that, again, if people choose to take part in something, even if that thing isn't good for them, that's if they're an adult, if they've got the capacity to understand what they're doing, that's their decision, surely.
Too right, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you get this sort of. I think it'll be a very long time before we see any real movements on it in the UK, unless like some big things change.
As long as they're adults and they know the consequences of what the drug's going to do to them, yeah, that'd be the only sort of thing I'd say on it. As long as they know what they're getting into and it's past the age of 16, let's say. Although the date I've just pulled up there is completely arbitrary.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think any kind of age limit's always going to be arbitrary, isn't it?
Yeah, but I can see why it's there at the same time.
Yeah, well,
like,
I mean,
we don't want kids developing a drink issue straight off the bat, for example.
Yeah, I mean, you get that thing, don't you, of everyone agrees, well, pretty much everyone agrees that, a 2-year-old shouldn't be allowed to drink.
Yeah.
Pretty much everybody agrees that, a 70-year-old should be allowed to drink.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, so somewhere there is a point where it becomes acceptable, and wherever you draw the line, it's going to be arbitrary, so you just sort of have to choose
the best.
Yeah, sort of like the arbitrary decision that's the least arbitrary, if you like.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a difficult thing to do because everybody's different, but you just sort of have to go.
You have to go.
Right, this seems, this seems about sensible. We'll go with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing we can agree on is that the drug legislation we have now is pretty silly. It's pretty racist, and I don't think that making more things illegal is going to help anyone.
Okay, so this one I wanted to talk about the likelihood of actual aliens being out there. Well, let me be clear on this one. I don't believe for a second that we're getting visits from little green men.
No, grey.
And I really don't believe that they're coming here to pile up rocks in funny shapes or crush crops to talk to us, because I can't think of a worse way to do communication and crushing some bullsods crops. I mean, imagine trying to communicate with something on this planet, crushing some of its food. Can't see that working somehow.
I think that only really sends one message. As I am fucking up your food supply. It's not a great way to say hello, is it?
No. That being said, I think that there are some tantalising but nothing solid hints of life out in the universe. I think there are about 3. I think the first one would be the one closest to home, Mars, which they've just found good water on, which is a good promising sign that for life. All of biology on Earth needs water to cope, to survive and to thrive. But there's another thing that's quite promising for life on Mars, which is the methane gas, which builds up and drops and builds up and drops. So it comes in peaks and troughs. Yeah, there are 3 ways that methane can be produced. One is it can come from volcanoes, and they know for a fact that Mars has been volcanically dead for millions and millions of years. The second way in which to do it is the sun's breaking down something within the Martian soil or regal, if you prefer, and producing methane that way, but scientists have dismissed this way and saying that there's no way it can produce anywhere near enough. And the third way in which it can be done is by life, as we've spoken about before, cows, kangaroos. But in all seriousness, it's probably something like bacteria that's on there.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose does that not, and I mean, this is maybe something we're going to come back to, but I mean, is there not maybe the fourth option of something else?
Well, yeah, I mean,
that we haven't thought of.
Yeah, definitely. We've only got the gas. We haven't figured everything out on this planet yet. So, but all of these are tantalising hints. There's nothing solid about any of it. The third thing I think that's really interesting in the universe for a sign of life is something called the WOW signal, found by SETI. SETI was made specifically to find signs of life, and it found a hint of one back in 1977. It's a very odd-looking radio signal that was found in the background of all the radio noise coming off the stars, and it did stand out something. It was such a shock to the guy doing the work on the subject, Jeremy A. Ham. I may have butchered the name a bit there, sorry. Wrote the words "wow" next to it. Now, if it was up to me, it'd be the "fuck me" signal.
What's that signal?
Yeah, holy shit! But I think the "wow" signal has a better ring to it, in all fairness.
Plus, it's you can say it on the news, which helps.
Yeah, the "fuck me" signal doesn't. Yeah. Although I'd like to hear a bleep every time that was said.
Yeah.
I don't know how the guy contained his excitement, but yeah. I must stress though that with the WOW signal, they've not found or heard anything since from that same spot. So again, like the Mars thing, it could be some other phenomena that we don't quite get. But it's an interesting blip on trying to find extraterrestrials, I guess. And yeah, the last thing that's out there is one rather more recently, which is the KIC 8462852 star.
Could you repeat that? I didn't quite.
No. Which is a star that they've found, which has a very odd light coming off it. Its light dips in a very sort of unusual way. Now, this star is 1,500 light years away from us, and yeah, it's not something that you can see with a visible eye at all. But yeah, there's something that they don't understand that's getting in the way of this star's light. Now, it was discovered by a satellite that's out there that isn't actually looking for ET as such. It's looking for exoplanets, or planets that are going around stars which are similar to Earth-like planets. But it's just found this one out of many thousands, which just has this very odd dimming going on. Now, there is a suggestion that it could be an alien superstructure that they may have found, which is the last hypothesis on the table, but it is on the table, and I found that one very interesting. But the thing that puts me off it is there are many wrong answers, but only one correct answer, and it could be anything up to now. And another thing that kind of puts me off it slightly is the scope of the thing. This is a star that's far brighter and far larger than our own sun, and they're estimating it to be about half the size of the star, which is just mind-boggling.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting. Obviously, because it's just whatever it is, it's something we've never seen before.
Yeah.
I mean that's exciting. Whatever it turns out to be.
Yeah, it's cool one way or the other, I think.
Yeah, unless it turns out to be something boring, you never know. So that's a possibility.
Well, if it's one out of a few thousand, then yeah, it can't.
Yeah. If it turns out that it just so happens somehow that every other star that we haven't looked at yet is like this, and we just happen to have looked at all the ones that aren't first,
right.
that would be both boring and really interesting at the same time.
You're a mathematician. I'm going to leave it for you to work out.
Yeah, it's about fucking unlikely.
Good answer.
Mathematically speaking. Yeah, I mean, and it is that kind of thing of, yeah, you get some people who maybe get a bit overexcited.
I think that you have to be careful with it. You have to understand that this is not evidence for aliens in the slightest. It's just a possibility. But it's fun to let your imagination run away with you a little bit. I mean, I freely admit that I got excited about it when I first started reading it, but at the same time, you had to douse it with cold water.
Yeah, I mean, it's that thing where you sort of like, oh, I mean, I don't want to piss on anyone's bonfire, but it's probably not aliens.
No.
It'd be cool if it was. I mean,
really cool.
Yeah, I mean, cool is all it would be, because it's like, isn't it like, it's
and
like
terrifying.
1,400 light years away? Something like that.
1,500 light years away from our sun. So there's no chance of us talking to them anytime soon.
Yeah.
I mean, our earliest radio signals are only like 70 light years in. And that's not even trying to talk to them. If there's anyone there.
Yeah, I mean, you get that kind of thing as well, that what we're seeing now is what was there 1,500 years ago. I mean, like, it could be that there's nothing there now. It could be that, in the meantime, I don't know, so, whatever, if it was an alien civilization, who knows, that civilization still there, as it managed to cock things up,
Yeah.
Or, is it...
There's any number of things that it could have been. They could have completely collapsed in on themselves as a society. They could have progressed. Any number of things that they could have gone through. But if they kept progressing, again, this is my imagination running away from me, but they could have... If they're building things at that scope, who knows where they are now. Or it could just be a pile of rocks.
Yeah, and I mean, who knows how advanced that pile of rocks is now?
Well, yeah.
Could be an even bigger pile of rocks.
Or a planet.
Yeah, I mean, because that's one of the alternative hypotheses, isn't it? That it's like the remains of a planet or a comet swarm that's sort of just gotten caught in the orbit of this star.
And one of the things I found that was both pro and against it was that if it was two planets that have collided into each other and it produced a lot of debris and that's what's getting in the way, if it had been there a long time, then it would have heated up by the star itself and therefore produced its own radio waves. And looking at the star's radio waves, it's not producing any more than it should. So the thing that's against it is that it may have happened really recently. There could have been a huge planetary smash recently from our point of view, if that makes any sense. Because obviously this happened 1,500 odd years ago.
Yeah, close to the 1,500 years ago that we're seeing, kind of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, but then I suppose you could say, because I think you maybe get into a bit sort of in danger of the Texas sharpshooter fallacy.
I don't know what that is.
Well, I mean, to use a sort of another analogy, it's like if I were to pull, just any card out of a deck of cards,
and I'd read into...
Yeah, it's like, okay, well, this is, that's a 7 of spades. Yeah, well, what are the odds that I get a 7 of spades?
Yeah,
1 in
I see what you're
52.
saying.
Yeah, pull out another one, and it's a 6 of clubs. Or what are the odds that I get a 7 of spades and a 6 of clubs? Something on the order of about 1 in 2,500. But... See, and you get that kind of thing of sort of saying, oh, what are the odds of that? And the thing is that once you've seen it, the odds are actually 1, because you know what it is. So you kind of get that thing then of sort of saying, oh, well, it can't be this because it'd only look like this if it had happened very recently. I mean, you could then sort of say, well, I mean, maybe this is the first time that we've seen the immediate aftermath of something like this.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be pretty interesting in itself, because again, that's something we've not seen before. We don't know what that should look like.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing, that's great about science, really, I suppose.
I mean, these three things, if they're completely not aliens, they're still fascinating within themselves. What is it about Mars that's producing this peaks and troughs of methane? Because we've got nothing to explain that now. We've got ideas, but they don't seem to fit, unless it is the bacteria. And it's the same for the WOW signal and... Kick, as I'm now calling it.
Kick numbers.
Yeah, kick numbers is a good start.
Yeah, I mean, there was another thing that I saw. It is that thing of like, it's always just great to see something new. You know what I mean? Like something we just we don't know. This is kind of like It's amazing. It's kind of like there's always some new thing.
Quasars, when they were first sussing out what they actually were, turns out it's just a massive black hole with dust lanes being spun around it. But just thinking about the temperatures that those things can get up to, and the fact that it's got to be, I'm assuming it's got to be hotter than stars, and then just thinking about what could be produced in that in terms of fusion and things like that. It's all fascinating new things, I think, when it comes to big stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about this before we started recording, actually, but the pulsar thing.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's one of these things I find sort of endlessly fascinating in a weird sort of way. Because we sort of saw this thing and it's putting out this regular radio signal, this regular pulse.
Do you know what the first one they found was called?
No, go on.
LGM.
Oh yeah.
It stands for Little Green Men. I'm not making this up.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me at all.
But I can totally understand their excitement around it. It wasn't a regular pattern coming from out there.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, and it's that thing, and because you can totally see from the perspective at the time. It's like, holy shit.
Yeah.
This looks like some kind of crazy space lighthouse, and that's worth getting excited about. And it turned out it was something else, but it turned out it was something else really fucking cool.
Yeah.
We know what. Oh, we have a good idea of what it is anyway. Now we have a lot of evidence that it's something else altogether. And yeah, I mean it's one of these things, isn't it, that you never know necessarily exactly
it's
how
disappointing
things are gonna...
in a fascinating and really interesting way, I'd say.
Yeah.
It's not a total loss.
Yeah. Well, I think fascinatingly disappointing is kind of... So it's the best we could hope for, let's be honest.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that's all we've got time for. As always, you can find us on Facebook. We've got a page there, Political Geekery. You can follow us on Twitter, @PolGeekery. Not that we use it much. You can contact us via email, politicalgeekery@gmail.com. So, yeah, I've been Sean.
I'm Mark.
Thanks for listening.
Bye now.